Mike, welcome to the Venari Partners podcast. Thank you for coming. We have a very important subject to talk about today, which is accessibility. But before we tackle that, let's perhaps hear from yourself a bit of an introduction, please.
Yeah, thanks, James, for the opportunity. My airline career started in 1992 with United Airlines. I've done mostly work in the strategy and planning airlines for airlines all across the world, and have been through major transformations in this industry, like Continental in the
Yeah,
90s, Air New Zealand, Latam. I've worked at high growth airlines like Qatar and United and Indigo in India. And since November 19, I was with Avianca. We went through a major transformation, change of strategy, change of culture. And I'm happy to say I'm today with Abra, which is the holding company for
yep.
Avianca Goal. And my responsibilities are in the strategy planning functions. But along with that, very pleased to say 3 years ago, I was asked with our human resource officer to change the culture at a 104-year-old Latin company, Avianca, which we're successfully doing. And finally, our topic for today, I'm also in charge of accessibility at Avianca, which is how do we make travel safer, better for persons in wheelchairs, persons who are blind, deaf, different neurodiversities, cognitive differences, etc.
Thank you for that. And obviously, this is a subject that's very personal to you. Do you want to explain a little bit about why?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell when I'm sitting down on a camera, but I am blind low vision. And I say blind low vision to help start to set the learning for people that only about 10% of people who say they're blind are complete dark blind.
Right.
I'm low vision. I can still see some shapes. I can see some colors. I can tell when it's light or dark outside. But beyond that, I really can't read a newspaper. I can see colors on a mobile phone, but I mostly live my life through voice rather through reading or looking.
Right.
And I was born with a eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. It's progressively gotten worse over my life. I was told I'd be total blind at 30. I've outlasted that a little bit, but I do use a mobility cane. I don't use a guide dog. And rather unusual to be a voice in boardrooms and executive leadership teams that have this personal identity of someone who is with a disability.
Well, one of the reasons I was so excited to have you come and have a chat to us today is because this is a topic that is getting, rightfully so, more news, more addressed in our industry. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the airline industry, but I think also our company obviously represent many companies in lots of different industries, and the learnings that we can discuss today, I think, can be applied to lots of other sectors. And likewise, I'd also love to hear your thoughts on where maybe our industry, the aviation industry, can learn. So perhaps we should start by defining kind of accessibility as a subject. Like, what does it mean to you? What is accessibility in your role when you tackle accessibility at the board level for ABRA? Like, what are you doing?
So accessibility is persons with disabilities. And as I said, there's a number of different categories. So the major categories in the world, and people will say this is the largest minority in the world because
Right.
it's about
Yeah.
15% of the population, somewhere between 1 and 1.5 billion people on the planet are living with either a mobility issue where they can't walk. That could be because they're quadriplegic permanently in a wheelchair,
Mm-hmm.
or could have broken their leg skiing last weekend and are on crutches for the next 2, 3 months.
Yeah.
It includes people like myself who are blind low vision. That's about 2.5% of the population. Mobility is 5 to 6. Is people who are deaf or low of hearing, which is 3.5% of the population. And then it's people with neurodiversity, with autism, with Down syndrome. And again, in total, about 15%.
That's
So
incredible.
when these people travel, like myself, when you think of the customer journey of an airline, from you book to you get to the airport, to you check in, drop bags, go to a lounge, go through security, get on a plane, use the restroom on a plane, land, collect your baggage, there are a lot of pain points for people. But those pain points are different for all four of the categories. So we've basically looked at those pain points and said, how do we address them in hopefully simple ways?
You and I have known each other a long time, and I know you travel a lot, right? So, what's been your experience of how accessibility is being addressed, and maybe not necessarily just from an ABRA perspective, but from an industry perspective? Like, what have you experienced? What's changing?
Yes, I'm a bit of a rarity that I think it's a golden age for people with disabilities. And I say that because I think things are improving. I've never met an airline CEO who says, we don't want disabled travelers on our planes. We want customers. And some of the solutions are very simple. But let me tell you the 5 tools that we like to think of. And I think this is universal to airlines and probably to other industries. But the biggest tool we have is just building awareness.
Right.
So I was thrilled to do this podcast with you because it gets the message out that here's a blind person who can talk, who can
Well, you're one of the
act
few people I ever
intelligently.
see talking about this, right?
Yeah, no, very few people talk about it, but we're misunderstood as persons with disability as well. There's this famous quote from Elie Wiesel. He was a Holocaust survivor who says the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. So it's the indifference when I'm on a plane, and this has happened recently, in a premium cabin where the flight attendant will ask my wife, what does he want to drink?
Right.
I can talk.
Yeah.
I can't see you, but I can converse with you. I can make my own decision on my beverage. But we're seen as a cluster of people at times that, they're inferior, they need help, misunderstood, etc. So awareness is our first biggest tool. Then we need to train people at airports, at travel agents, at airlines, at hotels, at theme parks. The third thing we have is to change processes. So just a quick story there at Avianca, right? When we have a plane, we know how many persons have said they have a disability.
Mm-hmm.
If we have a choice between 2 planes and one can go to a hard stand with a busing operation and one can go to a jet bridge, we try to send the one with the more people to the jet bridge because getting a person in a wheelchair up and down stairs is a lot harder. So that seems like common sense, right? But we weren't doing that 5 years ago.
I suspect many airlines probably still are not.
Still are not doing it. Other common sense on process change is when I fly by myself, I'll request special services, which means I'm legally entitled to someone to help me to the gate, on board the plane, even as far as getting a taxi at the airport. Today, it's randomly assigned whether I get the same gender as me or not.
Okay.
Why does that matter? One of the biggest pain points for a person in wheelchairs, people who are blind like me, is the simple thing of finding a restroom. Now, what is the probability that if someone of my same gender is with me who could go in the restroom with me, I'm 4 times as likely to ask for help or admit that I need to go to the restroom. If it's someone of an opposite gender, so simple process, try to assign the escorts taking people the same gender as the customer. Today, it doesn't happen. But that's a process change. The fourth tool that we have, awareness, training, process reengineering, is the smartphone, right? Digital technology. I can now take my phone out of my pocket, turn my camera on, call my wife in any city in the world and say, am I at gate 27 or gate 37? Right. I can say, is this the check-in counter for Avianca or for GOL? I can do amazing things that way. And that's true for deaf people. It's true for autism. So the digital revolution is really affecting and making the world a better place for persons with disability. And then the fifth one is the hardware. And this is where most people gravitate to. So again, there's a lot of different disabilities. People tend to think of a wheelchair trying to get upstairs.
Yeah.
That would be the very typical view of accessibility. It's an important issue, right? But changing that hardware over time takes time. You may not replace all the stairs with ramps, but having lifts or elevators accessible is then important. And that is a little bit of a slower process. And yeah, the holy grail for us in the airline industry is to get a wheelchair person in their wheelchair on board the plane with the wheelchair safely bolted to the floor so it can do the 20G test, et cetera, in case of emergency, and have that person not have to check their wheelchair. A big pain point is the wheelchairs will get damaged if they're checked. So we're working towards that, but the hardware is only a fifth of the solution for a fifth of the people.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what we think about. But accessibility issues are everywhere, no matter what your industry. If you start thinking about how your customers move around, there's accessibility issues there.
The airline industry is, of course, very global. Do you notice any parts of the world that are better at tackling this accessibility challenge than others? You're obviously based in Latin America at the moment. Where do you see sort of the improvements coming? Is it geographically biased?
I think there's definitely geographical differences, and language barriers
Yep.
don't help. I worked in India, and you have to go through armed security to get into the terminal.
Right.
Many of the people working at those positions did not speak English. So yes, having a Hindi translator in my pocket would be very, very valuable in India. Big cities like London or New York tend to have older infrastructure,
Right.
maybe,
Yeah. We
which
talked about
doesn't
this
help.
earlier.
Cities in the west part of the U.S. might be better than the east when it comes to trains. But it really go back to the 5 tools I said, and the biggest one is just awareness. So this often surprises me. In London, New York are 2 of the best cities for me to be as a blind, low vision
Really?
person. People have seen everything in these cities, right? They're kind of used to someone with a
Right.
mobile cane. Seeing someone with a mobile cane in Santiago, Chile, or Mumbai, India is maybe a little rare, and people will help me. And I've had people take me 20 streets out of the way to
Wow.
make sure I get to the restaurant or the hotel out of human kindness. And again, we're not looking for pity, but human beings can be a great asset to make life easier for persons with disability. If someone senses that I looked at my mobile phone, even though I might have just been looking at it to see a couple of bright colors, and they think I can see,
Right. Yeah.
and then they see me using a mobility cane or someone going into a restaurant with a guide dog, and they say, wait, are you really blind? Blindness has a lot of different,
Yeah. Of course.
think of people with hearing disabilities. Many people can hear very well out of one ear, but not the other.
Yep.
So depending on whether you're sitting on their left or right on a bus, makes a world of difference. So we call these hidden disabilities. There's actually a company here in the UK called Hidden Disabilities. They've developed something called a sunflower lanyard that you can wear to signify you may need a little bit of help in
Okay.
certain situations.
Make it more visible. Yeah.
More visible, the examples I've heard of, I have a friend who has a child with epilepsy, right? The fits don't happen
Of course.
24 hours a day. But when one happens and someone's lying on the floor, and you don't know that that's a person with epilepsy, you might think something quite different and have some
Right.
attribution error to say, what's wrong with this person?
Yeah.
So if they have the lanyard on at many airports around the world, airport and airline employees have been trained that that's a signal that there could be a hidden disability.
Right. That makes sense. So you're obviously seeing some geographical differences with how accessibility is being challenged. What about sectors? Like, where can airlines draw inspiration from? Where are you seeing the most improvements? Or is it specific companies? Maybe, I don't know.
So I'm fortunate. I'm in a blind low vision group with people from about 50 different industries, James. Fast moving consumer goods, where shampoo, body wash, hair conditioner, they'll start putting different tactile senses to tell which is which. So if I'm in a
Okay.
hotel, I can tell one stripe is shampoo, 2 is body wash, etc. So we can get inspired and learn from everywhere. Where can airlines inspire people? Again, the 5 tools I've just given you earlier, and the awareness being so important, and just educating your staff, right? Making sure disability is something that's talked about routinely in any company. But no, it's a complex issue, but a simple issue. So things that work for universal design tend to be better. Common sense is another great principle to have in this. Another great principle to have on accessibility is let's take progress over perfection. It's very hard not to offend somebody in the world today on any issue.
Yeah.
But you can't stand still and make no attempts to make the world better. You may fail. I read recently that the sweet spot for failure is about 15%, much higher than people would think. But we need to have that progress rather than perfection. We also need to look for low cost, high impact.
Mm-hmm.
Let's try to do things that'll help 1,000 people for $100, not help one person for $100,000. I know that may sound inequitable, but I think we have to use our cash. We have to use our financial resources.
Right? Yeah.
Well, again, it comes back to kind of common sense. And, with those sort of basic principles, and then the last one I'll throw out is, let's look at cooperation, not competition.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, at Avianca, we went to our maintenance team and said, can we create just Braille stickers that go above the seats to tell people which numbers? We'd be happy to share that at cost with other airlines, right? We don't want to make that a competitive
Where can
issue.
people go to share?
Well,
with,
they can,
you know, because it's not an obvious thing. I mean, obviously, you very kindly suggested there that Avianca would help other airlines, but where can people source information? Where do they get this opportunity to learn?
yeah, that's a great question. I think that's one I have to take away and maybe look to build a better platform. Because today I don't think that platform exists. I mean, you know, you can find me talking about these things on LinkedIn. You know, if you follow that, you can go through the wormhole and
Right.
find here in London, there's a organization called the Valuable 500 that works
Okay.
with 500 large organizations to improve accessibility for persons with disability and get that message out. There's one in the US called disability.in doing
Okay.
something similar. You know, I think every airline CEO in the US has signed on to disability.in's pledge to make the world more accessible. But you know, it's a world with a lot of content out there and limited time.
Yeah.
So thank you to the people, you know, listening this podcast because it takes an effort. But we don't have a universal platform because this issue is so complex,
Yeah.
and the number of disabilities are so much. You know, there's advocates for each disability, for blind, for deaf,
Yep.
for, you know, veterans who've lost a limb, you know, for autistic. But again, autism, what we like to say, at least at Avianca, is if you've met one autistic person, well, you've met one autistic person. They're all different.
Of
Some
course.
can perform some functions and not others. So when you hear someone's autism, don't think, yeah, I better talk to their parent or their partner or somebody else because they probably don't understand me. That's not true.
Yep.
That's a fundamental attribution error or systematic bias that we have. We moved from handicap, which automatically said there's something wrong with that person.
Yeah.
Today, we don't think about it that way. We just think it's a different identity. I have abilities that you don't have, James. You have abilities like seeing that I don't have. But you know, this is, again, if we want to get to the other topic of diversity, equity, inclusion,
Mm-hmm.
it's including people. You know, once people feel like they belong, some of the best employees are persons with disability, some with hidden, some without. You know, tend to be more dedicated, right? A trend in the world, you know, the hybrid, the work at home. Oh my God, for a blind person, for a person in a wheelchair,
Right. Game
this
changer.
opened up so
Yep.
many jobs that historically the employer said, but how are you going to get to work? And when I say that's my problem, can I do the job? They'd still say, but how are you going to get to
Right.
work? So, you know, it's not the answer for all industries. There are still jobs where you have to be there, like checking people in
Yeah,
at
of
an
course.
airport. But for a lot of other jobs, for back office jobs, you know, giving people the tools they need, giving them the environment they need, really moves us forward. So, no, we don't have a single platform. We don't have a single disability. We don't have a single answer. But let's go for that progress over perfection. Let's try a lot of things, and let's learn from each other. And
Sounds like there's a lot of reason to be optimistic, right? There's a lot. You talked about a golden age. There's clearly progress happening. What excites you most? Like, what if you were to sort of, you know, get your crystal ball out and think about what you could see in the future? Like, what are you excited about?
Yeah, I think the innovation, right? The startups, the people trying to not just make incremental change,
Right.
but make transformational and disruptive change. You know, I think that's what excites me. You know, there are now autonomous wheelchairs, right? No surprise,
Right.
there's
Yeah.
autonomous cars, but now there's autonomous wheelchairs. You know, I'm dying for the day when there's autonomous vehicles. That,
I bet,
you know,
yeah.
one of the biggest hindrances of my life is I don't drive a car.
Of course. Yeah.
30 years ago, that was almost unheard of, that you would be an adult and not drive a car. You know, today, the car can drive
Yeah,
me. You know, again, on the digital platform, you know, just think about where we were 20 years ago. You had to pull out and unfold a map.
Yeah.
Right now, it's on your phone.
Yep.
And now you have the choice. Do you want to look at it? Do you want to listen to the directions? Or do you even want to get a tactile vibrations on your wrist to get the directions? So we're using all the senses more. And the positioning on the phones is becoming amazing. You know, we're taking it from the accuracy of, am I on the right street, to am I right pinpoint on the street, to now going indoor buildings, right, with beacons and some sensors that there are startups working on navigating you through a 30-story building. Where's the bathroom? Where's room 102? You know, how many times have you gone to a hotel? The lighting can be very dark in the hallways.
Mm-hmm.
You've now become partly blind, low vision yourself, and you're looking for a room number, which you don't know if it's on top of the door, to the left of the door, on the floor. And I'd almost guarantee most people listening to this have gone the wrong way in a hotel at times,
course, yeah.
had trouble finding the room. That's a little bit of what it's like being blind. But now, you know, your hotel key could walk you to your door, in essence, by vibrating until you get to the right place.
So a lot of that is obviously technology-led, right? So I think technology is clearly something you're excited about. One of the things I'm seeing is, I think, a more serious, empathetic approach to this. You know, we talked about the fact there aren't really many chief accessibility officers. These things don't exist yet, but the conversation seems to be there. So for me, I'm excited about companies taking this seriously and actually, you know, for the right reasons, as opposed to just being commercially driven decisions.
Well, let me follow up on that, because you're right. I mean, the accessibility, it's getting, like I said, I know chief accessibility officers at companies like, you know, said Coca-Cola's and Intel's and Siemens and all sorts of companies around the world. I may have gotten some of those wrong, but just as examples. And you know, it's finding its place. It's being talked about, you know, but it needs to be elevated to the boardroom. It needs, it's just like a safety discussion. Yep. It needs to be elevated to the C-suite. Like I said, I consider my company lucky because they had someone with a disability actually sitting in the suite. How hard does it make for my CEO to say, let's not do that? No, let's spend a little bit of money. Let's, you know, this is not only a coworker, it's a friend, it's a colleague. It's someone who works with us every day. Let's make the world a better place. So it's happening. Maybe not as quick as everybody likes, but no, I think we're on the right track.
Becoming more prevalent and in some cases regulated, but the I, as we talked about earlier on, the inclusivity has to include accessibility as well. Well, look, thank you so much for coming by today. I really appreciate it. We really appreciate it. I hope the audience has benefited from your learnings. Where can they find you online, by the way? Maybe they should...
best place to find me is just my name, Michael Swiatek, and I'm at LinkedIn, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Opera Group. And you know, I love connecting with people. I love talking about the subject, as you can tell. And you know, I will get back to you if you have a question on accessibility and give us ideas for making air travel more accessible.
And even if they just follow you, I know they're going to read and listen to a load of really great content. And this is just one of the few mediums you're using to obviously shout the message. And I think you're doing a massively important job in the aviation industry, where, frankly, we're not the best at tackling accessibility. We're getting better, but it's people like you that are driving that.
So, James, thank you. You've always been an open ear to hear my ideas about the industry and accessibility and persons with disability, and Venari Partners. You know, you have definitely found a great space in what you do, and
that's very kind.
You giving me the opportunity to talk to some of your clients today over this medium is absolutely welcome, and it's the right thing to do, and it's how we build the awareness.
No, totally agree. And on that note, thank you.